Hi, all. A very good evening to all of you. So, it's been a very long time since we met. Probably we had our last class in the month of Feb. So, it's been more than 6 months that we met. And in these 6 months, a lot of things have happened around us. And right now, we are sitting at home, but still, the learning process is not ended. The reason why we are here today is to learn the amendments that have taken place from the time our class ended. Okay, so now even your RTP has been released, but in the RTP, no, they've covered the amendments from May 2019 till April 2020. Andre, they've covered for the entire 1 year. But in our textbook, while in class itself, we have already covered majority of the amendments given there. But still, till 30th April amendments we have to cover, no? So that is the reason we'll be sitting in this class today. And along with amendments, we'll also do some sort of revision, okay, if required. Now, I have the soft copy in front of me, which is around only 14 pages, and I'll be sharing this with you. One request to all of you is to please take a printout of this, okay, and keep it along with your textbook so that whenever you read the actual concept, along with that only you can read all these amendments, okay? And in this textbook, I have not put only the amendment part. I have also included the entire concept of that section so that when you start reading the section, no, you can relate to that section, remember those points, and then come and read the actual amendment. Okay. Now, for November 20, amendments have not taken place in each and every chapter, and therefore that's why you can see only 7 numbers here, whereas the actual number of chapters are 10 plus 4 as per your syllabus. Okay, but here I've taken only those 7 chapters where the amendments have actually taken place and which are applicable for your November 20. So can we start now? Yes. So first is your chapter on incorporation. Okay, now here short you will get some question either as a descriptive one or in the form of MCQ. So pay a lot of attention on this because this is one of the latest amendments and which is very useful in your practical life also. Now which section are we talking about? Section 7, okay, which deals with incorporation of company. Can you tell me which form was used for incorporation? Remember what I said in class? Yes, it was the SPICE form. Okay, and do you remember seeing the SPICE form also in class? I had downloaded the PDF and showed you in the offline mode how a SPICE form looks, whether you can correlate whatever you are studying in class with whatever is given in the SPICE form. Okay, now what they have done is, here is the amendment. Instead of SPICE form, they have released a new form called SPICE Plus upgraded version, okay, to incorporate a company. Shall we just read the first paragraph so that we can understand? Okay, so as per the company's incorporation amendment rules, the MCA, that is your Ministry of Corporate Affairs, has simplified the process of incorporation of company through an underline integrated web form known as SPICE Plus. Okay, integrated web form. So in this only they are telling you file one particular form, and with this form we'll integrate all the services available and let you incorporate a company very easily. Okay. Now SPICE web form is a post login service. Note this word, web form is a post login service. That means you need to log into this MCA website. Only then you will get access to this SPICE Plus. Now in class, it was an offline mode, whatever I showed you. I showed you MOA, AOA, I also showed you SPICE form. So what we could do is we could download the PDF format, fill in all the details along with the attachments and then upload the form. But here they have mentioned that it is a web-based form. Andre, you cannot do it in offline mode. You have to do it in the online mode. That means along with your internet connection, you log in to the MCA website with your credentials, username, password, that is what I mean. And then you start getting, the format of SPICE Plus form on your page. So it is not something like you can download as a PDF and do it in the offline mode. That has gone away now. Now it is SPICE Plus, which is a web form. Okay, so whatever lines have been underlined, no, pay more attention to that and try to remember those keywords. Okay. So obviously, whenever you register a new company, incorporate a new company, registration fees is there. But to simplify the process and make it more convenient for the users, for certain kind of companies, MCA has exempted them from paying the required incorporation fees, okay, registration fees. What are those companies? For the following type of companies, registration fees has been exempted. First, for companies having authorized capital of less than or equal to 15 lakh rupees. So if you are a company with a small time investment that is less than or equal to 15 lakh rupees, you can register your company without paying the required fees. Then point B, companies not having share capital whose number of members as per the articles is less than or equal to 20 members. Company is not having share capital. What does this mean? Can a company be incorporated without share capital? Of course, we have studied in our foundation level that companies can be either with share capital or without share capital also. Remember, company limited by shares, limited by guarantee, unlimited companies, etc. So here they are talking about the second type of companies, companies which are which can be incorporated without having a share capital. In such kind of companies, if the number of members are less than 20, then the rules are saying that chalo theek hai, you can incorporate your company without paying registration fees. Okay. Now here comes. By the way, do you remember the full form of SPICE? Simplified Proforma for Incorporating Company Electronically. Now the full form stands as it is. Only thing is a plus is added to that form. Okay. And what is the other name of the form? INC 32. So while writing in your exam, you write SPICE plus. Then put a slash and write INC 30 to use both the names while writing your answers. Okay. So as per rule 9, an application for reservation of name shall be made through the SPICE plus form or the INC 32 form. Okay, full stop. Let's take it one at a time. This part you understood? For incorporating a new company, we have to use the form INC 32 or SPICE plus. Okay. Now let's go to the next part. And change of name by using the web service run reserve unique name. I had also logged in the class, logged into this website and showed you how run works. Earlier, for reservation of name for any company, existing company, whether they want to change their name or new company which is being incorporated, the same services were being used, that is run service. Now they have divided into two types. First, if you want to incorporate a company, use SPICE plus form. Second, your company is already there. Okay, you want to change the name of such company. In such case, use this run service, reserve unique name. Okay. Now again I'm telling, new company madbeka, use SPICE plus form. Or company is already there, you only want to change its name. In that case, use the run service. What is the full form of run? Reserve unique name. Okay? Can we go along? Chalo. Now, what are they saying? What is the speciality of this SPICE plus form? Okay. In this SPICE plus form, no, it offers you 10 things which can be done. 10 things can be done by using the single form called SPICE plus. What is this? Let us see. Okay. Thus, we can say, I'm reading this point, okay. Thus, we can say that SPICE plus is a single application that helps in name reservation, obviously. Second, incorporating a new company, all the steps required in incorporation. Application for DIN. What is DIN? Director's Identification Number. You don't need to file a separate form for that. Suppose your company has 3 directors, okay. In that case, you can allocate DIN through using this form only. If there are more number of directors, then yes, you need to file separate ROC form. But for 2 directors or 3 directors, the DIN allotment can also be done through this SPICE plus form. Now, this is one important point, okay. You can also register for PT, professional tax, only if your company is being incorporated in the state of Maharashtra. See, now MCA is a central government ministry. Along with that, all the other state government departments also have to work or coordinate rather to get this done. Right now, only Maharashtra Department of Professional Tax is being associated with the MCA. Let's see, later on, probably other states will also coordinate, and you can have many more state level registrations also in the Spice Plus form. But as of now, only Maharashtra State ka Professional Tax, if you're being if you want to register, that can be done through this form. Okay, and it is not optional, mind you, it shall be mandatory for all new companies whose registered office will be in Maharashtra. Next one, you can do a bank account opening also. Obviously, if you register a new company, company can have its own bank account. It should have its own bank account. That formality also can be done through this Spice Plus form. You can save the hassle of just going through, submitting more documents and opening a bank account. That also will be taken care of in this Spice Plus. You can also apply for PAN and TAN. PAN, permanent account number. What is TAN? If you've done your income tax syllabus, you must be knowing what is TAN. A person who deducts TDS, okay, tax deducted at source, okay, a person who deducts TDS has to go and deposit the same. He is known as the deductor. He has to deposit into the customer's account. For that, TAN number is required. That service also can be taken care of by this Spice Plus form. Then GSTIN, Goods and Service Tax Identification Number, that registration also can be done through this form. EPFO, what is EPF? Employee Provident Fund Organization. So there are certain salary limits, monetary limits, and the number of employees for which EPF will apply on such organization. That number also, registration number also, can be done here. ESIC, what is ESIC registration? Employee State Insurance Corporation. So if you have a particular number of employees working in your company, in your organization, in that case, your entity has to be registered under this act, ESI Act. That registration can also be integrated with this Spice Plus form. That is what they're telling. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So you had a total of 10 services which can be done just by using the Spice Plus form. Okay, now all these 10 services can be done in one attachment to Spice Plus. See, Spice Plus is the main form. Okay, adike you will have lot of attachments. You will attach your memorandum, articles, declaration by subscribers, directors, etc. I hope you remember. Okay, so all these 10 services ke liye they've given one extra Agile Pro form. What is this Agile Pro? What a name. Look at the full form of that. AGILE PRO. The full form is Application for GSTIN. So AGESI. I comes from here in ESI. L comes from this plus word. E comes from EPF. Pro, PRO alva. P comes from this professional tax registration, and O comes from this opening of bank account. So in one name only, they are naming all the services that can be done through this Spice Plus form. Okay. So obviously, to get all these details, you need to submit the requisite address proof and your ID proofs also. Now, you remember reading declaration by the first subscribers and directors is also required. So that also is mentioned here. Declaration by all subscribers and first directors in INC 9 shall be submitted. INC 9 is the form name. So once you submit all these things, okay, provided your data and information is correct, your job is over. Now it's the responsibility of the ROC to check all these and give you a COI, Certificate of Incorporation. Okay. So next point, the registrar shall register all the documents and information and issue a Certificate of Incorporation in the form number INC 11. Now, what does this latest COI contain? It will contain the SIN and PAN of the company. Remember, you applied for PAN also in the Spice Plus. Therefore, along with your SIN number, corporate identification number, you'll also be given the PAN number in the incorporation certificate itself. Okay. Now, now that I've given you the entire list of what can be done in a SPICE Plus form, how do we summarize it? Suppose you get a question, application based question, and the crux of the matter is how do you incorporate a company. Okay, so I've just given you bullet points here, just the phrases I've mentioned. You need to mention the entire sentence. Okay, so first and foremost, before you go into the SPICE Plus form, create a login, etc., what do you require? Physical signature agala. So you require a digital signature. Who all should have digital signatures? Only for directors? Even subscribers need to sign, alva. So even directors as well as subscribers should get their digital signatures done. Next, you start filling in all your SPICE Plus form with your name, address, or whatever name you want, proposed name for the company, etc. Now, what is your object of the company? Object clause. Remember all those clauses that will be mentioned in your memorandum and articles. Memorandum is your INC 33 and articles is your INC 34. They will form as an attachment to your SPICE Plus form. Now we remembered a list of 10 services which we can avail by filing this one form. What is all that 10 services mentioned? Where is all that 10 services mentioned? It is mentioned in your Agile Pro form, form number INC 35. See, it's easy to remember. It's in a series. Main form INC 32 SPICE Plus. 33, 34 is memorandum and articles. 35 is Agile Pro form. So 32, 33, 34 and 35, they form a series together. Apart from that, you need a written consent of directors and subscribers. Okay. Then declaration, they have to declare that they don't have any interest, or they have to disclose the interest in the company, whether there is any related party, whether they were convicted of any offense, etc. Go back to your textbook. You'll remember all those. That form number is INC 9. Okay. Lastly, one more thing. While filing your SPICE Plus form only, if you know that this is going to be the address of your company, in that case, you can mention that in this form only. But no, while at the time of incorporation, if you're still not sure which place is your company going to be set up, in that case, after your company is set up, you need to file form INC 22. That is to show where your registered office is. For this, you will have time limit of 30 days after your company is incorporated. But usually, at the time only when you incorporate a company, you'll have an idea where your office will be set up. So this form is optional. Okay, it is not a compulsory form. The other forms which is written above is compulsory. This registered office one is optional. If you already have an office, it's mentioned in SPICE Plus. If you've still not set up an office, it will come in INC 22. You will file it later after your company has been incorporated. Okay, so this was all about SPICE Plus. So either it can come as an MCQ or descriptive part, I'm telling you. So just pay more attention to it. Let's continue. This is section 10A. Now section 10 was there, 11 was omitted by the act, 12 talked about registered office. So now they brought in this 10A. This is already covered in class, so I'll just keep this explanation short. Okay, so a company incorporated after 2nd November 2018. What does this particular date signify? That means a company which is incorporated after Companies Amendment Act 2019. Okay, they cannot commence their business without filing a particular form. Okay, they have to file a declaration within a period of 180 days. Okay, and that has to be verified by whom? CA, CS, CMA, not all of them, either of them in practice, that all the subscribers have actually paid the money required to buy the first shares of the company. So it's a declaration given by the director, and that all the subscribers have paid the value. Okay, therefore we are going to commence our business. And if you're a banking company or if you are listed on the stock exchange, then you need to take approval from RBI, SEBI, etc. also. And see this word, and another condition also should be satisfied. The company has already filed with the ROC a verification of its registered office. So you should have a registered office. No, if you're a real company, you should have filed INC 22 to show where your registered office is. So two things should be done within 180 days. First, declaration from directors that all money, the value for all the shares have been received from subscribers. And what is point number 2? The company should have already filed with the ROC INC 22 saying that yes, this is the particular place where we are doing our business. Okay. Now, if they've given you some compliance to do, there is also some penalty associated with it if you don't comply. So what is the penalty? If any default is made, then company shall be liable to a penalty of 50,000. An officer in default, 1,000 per day. Maximum is 1 lakh rupees. Now, many people ask how to remember these penalty clauses. Okay. Frankly speaking, you can't. Even I can't. I don't remember the entire 100%. Okay. So only in these amendments, wherever penalty has been mentioned, make a note, put an effort to learn these, because chances of them asking this is more. But in all other cases, up to you. It cannot be done according to me. It is not possible. You, instead of messing up the entire thing, just learn 4 or 5 important stuff and leave the rest. Okay? Now, penalty is also there on this section 10A. Read the last point. Where no declaration has been filed within 180 days and the registrar also believes that company is just formed and kept. Okay, it is not, they don't have any intention of carrying on any operations. In that case, he can take action himself. He may initiate action for removal of the company's name. He himself will take action and remove the name from the register of companies. Right? This was your section number 10A. Okay, so rule 8, 8A and 8B. What are the rules required to be followed to name a company? Okay, it's not as easy as naming any individual. Now this rule 8, 8A and 8B, it's already there in your textbook. So it's already covered. Here, I'm just giving you some examples. Okay, and these examples are not prepared by me. It is actually given as an illustration in your bare rules only. On the website only it is there. So what is this rule 8 telling us? The name of a company shall not be identical or resemble any name of an existing company. Okay. So they don't want similar sounding names or similar names. Now let's try an exercise and see whether such names can be kept. I've given you 2 columns. Okay. Existing company, company which is already existing, let's assume. And proposed company. Now, proposed company means you want to name a company this way. You want to incorporate a company in this manner. What is the last column? Now we have to check whether ROC will allow such a name or not. Okay. Firstly, if the existing company is there, Reliance Industries Limited, LIMITED, can you form one more company with a short form, LTD? Common sense, ROC will reject your name. Another kind, there is a company called as Green Technology Limited. You will play around with the singular plural version and try to make companies like Green's Technology, Green Technologies, etc. Both will not be allowed. But suppose you have a company called SM Computers Limited. Okay. And you try to incorporate a company called SMS Computers. S add madodrinda, does it make it a plural? No, right? SM is different and the word SMS can mean something different. So in such a case, ROC will accept your new name. But you know, these are the examples, but most of the time it is better to be on a safer side, have a conservative approach and not go in for such similar sounding names in the first place. Okay. Next, suppose there's a company called ABC and you incorporate one more company, A space B space C or A dot B dot C. Both names will be rejected. A company name is Ascent Solutions. You're trying past, present, future tense. Ascended Solutions, Ascending Solutions, chancella. ROC will reject. Phonetic variations. What is phonetics? Phonetics means the way you pronounce certain words. Chemtech Limited is the name. Now you try different combinations of spellings, okay, starting with CH, KE, KH, whatever names you try. But while pronouncing, we'll pronouncing it as Chemtech only. So the entire thing will not be allowed by ROC. Color and color. One more example I've given here. See, the way we spell it is the same. The way we pronounce it, sorry. COLOR is American English. COLOUR is your British English. But the phonetics is the same. So again, not allowed. Let's see some more examples. Yes. Okay. Suppose you start putting the word .com. Let's assume you are an IT related company. Okay, so there's already a company called Ultra Solutions. Now you want to start a company called ultrasolutions.com limited. Okay, that will not be allowed. But suppose you want to start a company called Supreme Ultra Limited. Okay, Ultra Solutions anta ide, you want to start something called as Supreme Ultra Limited. Now this is entirely different. People will know the difference between Ultra and Supreme Ultra. So in the second case, ROC might allow you the new name for your company. Another case where you play around with the order of words. Ravi Builder and Contractors is already there. Now you want to start Ravi Contractors and Builders. Not allowed. But if you start Ravi Shankar Man Builders and Contractors Limited, no, Ravi is a different entity and Ravi Shankar Man, the name is only entirely different. So in such a case, ROC will allow or accept your incorporation form. If you use articles, okay, next point I'm talking about, a and the name is congenial to us, you make it a congenial to us, the congenial to us, name will not be accepted. Here is a good example, okay. The name of an existing company is Isha Industries Limited. What if you make it Anisha Industries? Okay, such examples can happen only in our country, okay. Isha is a different name, Anisha is a different name. Here, Anisha, An is not an article. Anisha is a different name altogether. So in such a case, Anisha Industries will be a newly incorporated company. It will be accepted. Done. So we saw a lot of examples. Now comes a stupid part. Okay. Complete translation of a name will not be allowed by the ROC. For example, you have an existing company called as National Electricity Corporation Limited. The same thing, if you want to, the entire name you translate and you form a company called Rashtriya Vidyut Nigam Limited, that will not be allowed. Okay, it will not be allowed. But the stupid part is here. But partial translation is allowed, it seems. God knows why. There is no head tail logic in that. Just learn it for your exams. For example, Hike Construction Limited is an existing company. Now you don't change the entire word, you don't translate the entire word, you only call it as Hike Nirman Limited. Only the construction word, you change it as Nirman. In such a case, they are telling, yes, ROC can allow you to incorporate such a company. See, complete translation is not allowed. Partial translation is allowed. Such name will be accepted. But again, as I said, always have a conservative approach. Better not to incorporate such companies in the first place with similar sounding names. So why did we see all these examples and all? The reason was to understand Rule 8 better. It is saying do not have similar or identical names. Okay. So let's go on. Now this only we'll just glance through, already done. As per Rule 8A, you cannot keep undesirable names for your company. Now what is this undesirable? Is there any particular definition? The CG has given you a list which it considers as undesirable. Firstly, it is prohibited under emblems and names. You cannot name it after, you cannot name a company after an emblem. Name should not include any trademark. Obviously, you cannot name your company as Lux Private Limited because Lux product is a trademark. You cannot include any word which is offensive to people. Fine. If it resembles the name of an LLP also, you cannot name a company. Okay. Obviously, common sense, name which is already reserved will not be given to you. or if it resembles the popular or abbreviated version of any existing company or LLP. There's a company called Hindustan Unilever. Can you apply for a name as HUL? Not possible. Proposed name should not contain the words British India. Okay. If it's identical to the name of a company dissolved as a result of liquidation proceedings and a period of 2 years has not elapsed from the date of such dissolution, which means there was a company, it got liquidated, the company is no more, and 2 years have still not passed. So obviously people will still remember the old company. So that's why they will not allocate the new name, the name of such company, to your new proposed company. Next point, if the proposed name is identical with the name of a company which is struck off as per 248 of the Companies Act, strike off. Now, who has the power to do this strike off? Registrar of Companies. If you have not filed annual returns, if you have not filed financial statements, or just now we read section 10A, if you have not filed the form required for commencement of business, ROC can strike off your name. So such a name also they will not allocate to you. This point J is very nice. Okay, the proposed name of a Nidhi company under the Act does not have the words Nidhi Limited as a part of its name. Now, what do you mean by a Nidhi company? Do you remember? A company which, was into the business of lending and depositing, and the main purpose was to encourage the habit of savings among members. And one more rule associated with that was any company which is into such business should always have the words Nidhi Limited at the end of its name. Now, for example, let's say you're an IT company. Okay, you may want to name your company Nidhi Aura Limited. Will this be allowed? Of course, because Nidhi, you're using it as the first name. Okay, and your business is not into financing at all, you're into some other business, so this name will be allowed. But can I name an IT company as Canara Nidhi Limited? Such a name will not be allowed. It will be considered as undesirable for the IT company. Nidhi Limited anta, if you want to use the name in your word, Nidhi being the middle name, in such a case your company should be into the business of Nidhi, otherwise it will not be given to your company. Understand the difference? Okay, if your business is into financing, then you can use the word Nidhi Limited in your name, Nidhi being the middle word. But first name, can I use it as Nidhi? You can use it and form any kind of company. Okay, so this was all about your undesirable names according to the central government. 8B again, very easy. As per rule 8B, following words cannot be used unless CG gives you an approval. Like national authority, there's a huge list of words by which I've taken only a few important ones. National authority, undertaking, central, Rashtrapati, municipal, panchayat, court, governor, republic. If you want to use such words in your company's name, then approval of CG is required in the first place. Otherwise, they will not give approval for these kind of names. That was your rule 8, 8A and 8B, which is already there in your textbook. We are just revising it again. Okay. So this was all about your incorporation chapter. Okay. Good amendments have taken place here. The major one being your Spice Plus form, section number 7. Now coming to the chapter on prospectus. Okay. Now for this prospectus, I have given almost 1 page. Now don't get scared thinking that the entire thing is a amendment. Okay. The amendment, whenever it comes, I'll tell you. I've given you the entire paragraph so that you know under which section this amendment is being done. Okay. So in this chapter, the amendment is in this paragraph, matters to be stated in a prospectus, section number 26. Okay. So it tells you what all rules you have to follow, SEBI, you have to follow SCRA, Securities Contract Regulation Act, etc. Now tell me, just remember and tell me, When do you file a copy of the prospectus with the ROC? Before you give it to the public or after you invite the public? It is before, right? At least, I mean, the time gap between you giving it to the registrar and you actually going public should not be more than 90 days. Okay, so the amendment is over here. No prospectus, no prospectus shall be valid if it is issued more than 90 days after a day on which copy thereof is delivered to the registrar. There is no, big shot amendment and all. Earlier they used to say registration of your prospectus. They used to use the word registration. Now instead of the word registration, they are using the word filing with the registrar, delivered to the registrar. That is what it means. Okay, there's no change in the number of days or the method in which you file these things with the registrar. The only change which has happened is, instead of using the word registered, you will write your answer as the prospectus is to be filed with the registrar. That is the only change. Okay, so no need to look into this too much. And the small change which has happened in this chapter is in section number 29. Offer of securities to be in the DMAT form. Now regarding this DMAT, I've already explained in class with a diagram. Okay, can you directly communicate with the company in case of DMAT? There is one more person involved, two people. One is you, then is your DP, depository participant. Remember the examples of NSDL and CDSL. Okay, then you have banks, depositories were NSDL and CDSL. Then you have DPs, depository participants. That is the bank where you go and open your DMAT account. Okay, so you have four people involved in the DMAT process. One is you, who wants to buy shares. Second is depositories, NSDL and CDSL. Third is your depository participants, that is all the banks in which you go and open your DMAT account. And fourth is the company which is actually issuing you these shares. Now, till now, there were two types in which you could maintain your shares. One was in the physical form, paper form, and the other was your DMAT form. Only these DMAT provisions were applicable for your listed companies. And where are these rules written for dematerialization? There is a Depositories Act 1996 where all the rules relating to DMAT and depositories were written there. Now, what they have done is, notwithstanding anything contained in any provision, every company making public offer. So listed company के पास तो DMAT होगा ही. I mean, you have to have DMAT account if you're trading with a listed company. Then they also say every company which is making a public offer and such other class or classes of company as may be prescribed. Now they've written as may be prescribed. We don't know what they have prescribed in this rule 9A. They've said all your unlisted companies. Now, public companies, they can be of two types. One is being listed on any stock exchange, or they can be a public company but being unlisted. So now they've brought in the second type also, these unlisted public companies also into the DMAT purview. So if any unlisted companies still go along with paper share certificates, they have to get all of them converted to the DMAT form. That is what is being said in this section. Right? Not a very big change. Can we move on? Yes. Now coming to your chapter on share capital and debentures. Again, this amendment is already discussed in class. I'll just explain to you in few sentences. Equity share capital was of two types. ये हमने सीखा. Ordinary equity shares and your DVRs, differential voting rights. That means they carry differential rights with respect to voting or dividend or otherwise in any other manner. Now, to issue DVRs, a company has to satisfy certain conditions. What was the first conditions? It should be authorized by your articles of association. If it's not written in your articles, first you have to go and alter the AOA. Okay. So point number one, To issue DVRs, issue of shares with differential rights must be authorized by the articles. Okay. Issue of shares with differential rights must be authorized by passing an OR, ordinary resolution. ठीक है. This third point, pay more attention, amendment. The voting power in respect of shares with differential rights of the company shall not exceed 74% of the total voting power, okay, including voting power in respect of DVRs. Okay, now they've made it a little complicated. How do we understand this? Suppose there are 10,000 equity shares, okay, and there are X number of shares with DVR, differential voting rights. So what should be this composition of X? How much percentage of this X number of shares or voting power can be there in a company? Max to max, it shall not exceed 74%. Okay, we'll write down 74%. This 74% shall not exceed, alva, so we'll put this symbol, lesser than or equal to. So this DVR composition should be lesser than or equal to 74%. 74% of what? Of total voting power including DVR shares. So they are saying 74% of 10,000 plus this X. Okay, so the entire share capital you see later, 10,000 normal shares plus X number of DVR shares. उसका अगर तुम लोग 74% लोगे, that is your amount. It should be the number of your DVRs should be lesser than this 74%. This is the amendment which has taken place. Earlier, they said the same concept in an ulta manner. They said maximum DVRs can be 26%. Okay, same thing. They said it in a different way. Now they are saying it in a more indirect way. They are saying maximum amount of DVRs should be less than or equal to 74% of what? Of the total voting power. That is your ordinary equity shares voting power plus voting power associated with your DVR. That is one amendment what has taken place in this chapter. Okay, the remaining points I've just put them there so that you get a flow of what are the conditions required to issue DVRs. But the amendment takes place in this point number 3. Next amendment is in your topic of debentures. Okay, your definition of debentures was already changed. Okay, it was made into an inclusive definition that we have already covered. Then we also know that a DRR has to be created, a debenture redemption reserve. What is the amended part? Now this whatever we are seeing on the screen, that they are giving you the conditions. What is the percentage of debenture redemption reserve, DRR, to be created by any class of company, or whether it should be created or not in the first place. Okay, so this can come as a part of your MCQ. They can give you a particular type of company, say it's a financial institution or an NBFC, what percentage of DRR is to be created, or whether DRR is required in the first place or not. So that is mentioned in your table here. Okay, so in most of the cases, if you see, they say no DRR is to be created for public and private placement. So you can just go through this table. And what percentage of money should be put into the fund, the reserve fund what we create? Not less than 15%. Okay, not less than 15. That means at least 15% of what? Of the amount of debentures maturing up to 31/3 of which year? Of the next year, should be put into a separate bank account. Okay, so this point also I'm not going into detail because we have already done it in class. So this was all your amendment on share capital and debentures. One was a condition related to your DVR, and one was specifying the percentage of DRR or debenture redemption reserve to be created. Now, in this chapter on management and administration, one small change has taken place, one small amendment. Okay, it talks about significant beneficial owners. Now, owners of a company means what? The members, the shareholders there. Who are the significant beneficial owners? Now you know the concept of corporate veil. Okay, अगर उस वेल को निकाल दिया जाए, if you remove the corporate veil, then you can know who is the actual beneficial owner. Or let's say there's a chain holding. Okay, there are many places where you hold shares indirectly. In such case, the company has to give a or rather it has to maintain a register talking about who its actual owners are, who the real owners, who the significant beneficial owners are for that company. Okay, and they've introduced penalty also here. If a company fails to make such a declaration, punishment will be not less than 10 lakh rupees. That means minimum 10 lakh rupees, but it may extend to 50 lakhs. So they've given a range for penalty, and this penalty is for the company, 10 lakhs to 50 lakhs. And if the failure continues also, then 1000 rupees per day will be your penalty. That is all about your maintenance of register for significant beneficial members. Who will maintain this register? The company will maintain such a register. Okay. Now AGM, I'll come back in the end. Now, okay, some important amendments have taken place in this chapter on accounts of companies. We all know that NAFRA has been constituted, right? National Financial Reporting Authority, section number 132 of the Act. What are its functions? Now, on this function, you might get a 4-mark question. Okay, it's good if you know this because it can be written as a direct answer. Okay, what are the functions of NAFRA? First is it will make recommendations to CG about the accounting policies or auditing policies, or if there's no policy in our country, what is the need of the hour for such policies to be implemented. So it will sit and it's a body which will sit and recommend the central government. Second, monitor and enforce compliance with AS and SAS, accounting standards and standards on auditing. Okay. Third, biggest point, it will oversee the quality of services of the professionals. Sorry, this should be professionals. Okay, associated with ensuring compliance. That means they will monitor the auditors of a company. So is NAFRA monitoring or investigating a company directly? That auditors will do the job of auditing. NAFRA will sit and monitor the auditors of the big companies. Okay. Now, what are or who are the members who constitute this NAFRA? NAFRA shall consist of a chairperson who shall be a person of eminence, having expertise, etc., etc. And they shall not be associated with any firm or company during the time they are, members of this NAFRA committee. Okay, so this can come as a part of your MCQ. Who is the chairman? Is he a person of eminence? How many members, constitute NAFRA, etc. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this, which is already done, is this point. Now, we are all talking that NAFRA has been constituted and, they'll oversee the auditors of the big companies and all. What is this definition of big companies? Okay, that is given here. Oversee the quality of service of the auditors of the following classes of companies, not only companies and body corporates also. First, companies or securities are listed on India or outside, so all listed companies will automatically come under the purview of NAFRA. Second, unlisted public companies with paid up capital not less than 500 crores. That means at least 500 crore paid up capital. Annual turnover 1000 crores. Or all your outstanding loans, etc., of more than 500 crores. Okay, so three conditions are given. Any one condition, if an unlisted company satisfies, then such company auditor will come under the purview of NAFRA. Okay, NAFRA will start overseeing, monitoring what all the auditor does and how well he does any work for this particular company. Third are all your special companies. Remember your advanced accounts, insurance company, banking company, companies engaged in electricity supply or generation. They also, such auditors also come under purview of NAFRA. Fourth, any body corporate or reference made to NAFRA by CG in public interest. Now this is open-ended. CG can recommend any auditor of any body corporate which it wants to be under the purview of NAFRA. Then last point, if a body corporate is registered in India, registered outside India, and it is contributing to more than 20% of the revenue in the consolidated financial statements. In such a case, that foreign body will also be, under the purview of NAFRA. For example, you have a company which is there in Sweden, for example, okay, and it's registered outside India, okay, and that is contributing to more than 20% of the revenue in India for your Indian company. In such a case, that Swedish company, obviously that will be audited by some other auditor, some foreign auditor. He will also come under the purview of NAFRA. So once again, I'm repeating, okay, companies do not come under the purview of NAFRA. इन सारे जो big companies है, their auditors are there, no, they will be monitored by NAFRA. The individuals, the auditors or the LLPs or firms which audit such big companies will come under NAFRA, not the companies themselves. Now question arises, how will NAFRA know which company is big, which is listed, which unlisted company is falling under my category, etc. For such a case, they have given one new ROC form. Every existing body corporate other than a company. Now company means an auditor will file ADT1. So obviously NAFRA will know which company, what turnover it is, what net worth it is having, etc. But problem comes with these body corporates. Okay, ADT1 you file for being the auditor of a company under Companies Act. But what if you're the auditor for body corporate? In that case, you will not file ADT1, no. So in that case, how will NAFRA know that such a body corporate is satisfying, these big conditions? Therefore, this point is given. Every existing body corporate other than a company, if it satisfies any of the conditions that we read, then it shall inform NAFRA within 30 days of these rules. Commence agide. Okay, these rules have already been commenced. Inform NAFRA 1. Okay, so instead of filing ADT1, if such huge body corporate satisfy these big conditions, then the auditor of such body corporate will inform NAFRA in form NAFRA 1. Okay, then every auditor referred to above, that means whatever I just spoke to you now, shall file a return with the authority on or before 30th November of every year in form NAFRA 2. Okay, so who will file NAFRA 1? Company will file and say, yeah, we are satisfying some of the norms given above. Therefore, please monitor the person who is auditing our body corporate. So that comes from the company. Now, who will file this form NAFRA to? The auditor. Okay, so two people for the same entity, they'll be filing the form. One, NAFRA 1 entity itself will file. Then NAFRA 2 will be filed by the auditor of such entity. Both will file the form and the particulars to your NFRA, National Financial Reporting Authority. Okay, so this was the point where I wanted you to focus on more. Yeah, now there's a small amendment here, section 134. It talks about your board of directors report, etc. So in a board's report, there are a lot of substantial information given there, and I have included all these things so that you just go on reading it. All these things are not amendments. Okay, I'll just tell you where the amendment is. Now there is one point which says other matters can be given in a board of directors report. They give a long list of other matters. Now come to the point where I have underlined. What is something which needs to be given in the board report? A statement regarding opinion of the board with regard to integrity, expertise and experience of the independent directors. Not all the directors, only the independent directors who are there. Regarding them, what about their integrity, whether they have the expertise and what is their experience. Regarding that, you have to give a statement. Okay, who will give a statement? The other board of directors will give a statement about this particular independent director. Now, what do you mean by this word proficiency? They've defined it here. Okay, proficiency means the proficiency of the independent director as ascertained from the online proficiency self-assessment test. So even it's your journey of writing tests is not complete once you qualify or you get some expertise. Once you become independent director in any company, you have to undergo the OPSAT, that is your online proficiency self-assessment test. So in this test, you can actually judge the integrity, expertise of your independent director, and that has to be mentioned as a part of your board's report. So this is one amendment. And another small amendment is the last 2 points already there in your textbook. Disclosure whether maintenance of cost records under 148 are being maintained by your company, and a statement that company has complied with the provisions relating to complaint committees under the POSH Act. What is this POSH Act? I was telling you in class, Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. Okay, so the last 2 points I just read, I did not explain anything, already given in your textbook, already done in class. So I just want you to focus on this particular point which we discuss now. Okay, one small amendment in this section. Okay, now the place apart from your SPICE plus, no, another place where 100% you will get questions, okay, is your CSR, section 135. Now this section, not only from amendment point of view, it's an important section because you keep getting application based questions here. Are all companies required to do CSR? No, they have given some substantial limits. Okay, if you have net worth more than 500 crore, your turnover crosses 1000 crore ka limit, or your net profit is more than 5 crores or more, such big numbers, only if you satisfy these conditions for not 1 year, from the last 3 years, if any of these conditions are being satisfied, then you will have to do CSR from your company. Now, before allocating funds for CSR, first you need to form a CSR committee. So some of the board of directors, they themselves will form a CSR committee. Okay. Now, how many members should be there is also mentioned here. The CSR committee shall consist of 3 or more directors, out of which at least one shall be an independent director. 3 or more directors. So can I say I will have one normal director and one independent director? Minimum is 3. Okay, so it is 3 plus 1. 3 directors plus 1 independent directors, 3 or more. Now, for example, in case of a private limited company, okay, let's assume a private limited company also has substantial net worth, substantial turnover, huge profits. In that case, what will be the composition of this committee? But they have only 2 directors. Okay, so you cannot have this 3 or more plus 1 independent director and all. In such case, only these 2 directors will form a part of the CSR committee. Okay, so where there are more directors, 3 directors plus 1 independent director will form CSR committee. If there are only 2 directors, they only will become part of the CSR committee. All this we knew. How much should a company contribute to CSR? At least 2% of what? Of 1 year profits, of average net profits made during the immediately 3 preceding F5s. I also showed you various calculations in class, various illustrations, how to calculate this 3 years, okay, and how to calculate this 2% of CSR. Now focus on these points where underline is there. Any amount remaining unspent. Now tell me, if you are unable to spend the entire 2% in 1 year, what happens? In such a case, the unspent amount, was there any penalty till now? There was no penalty. Okay, they only said you have to spend a minimum of 2% of your net profits, and they also said you have to disclose everything in your board's report. If you have not spent the particular amount, then you have to disclose it in the board's report and give a reason as to why you were not able to spend this money towards CSR. Now what they are saying is, if there is any amount remaining unspent, then what is to be done? Now, before we continue, I'd like to explain you what is this ongoing project. Heck yeah. Okay. For example, if a company wants to build a school, okay, minimum, let's say it will take around 2 or 3 years. In such a case, it is a continuous project. Money should be allocated towards that project for a continuous period. It will not get over in 1 year. Therefore, that will be called as an ongoing project, okay, which is going on right now. It will not finish in one FY. Now, if I take one more case where you want to conduct a workshop or you want to help in, flora, fauna, all those conditions under section 7, short-term goals, okay, which can be done in one FY. So those are one kind of projects. And one more example what I gave you was of this school, which will take around 2 or 3 years to be built. The school example is an example of your ongoing project. Okay. Now what happens if the unspent amount, okay, 2% you have calculated, you are able to spend only 1.5% of the net profits. Some amount is still there which you have not spent towards CSR. Adanna yen madbeku. If unspent amount does not relate to an ongoing project, it's not a continuous project for many number of years, then such unspent amount you cannot keep it with yourself. You have to transfer it to the PM Relief Fund or the PM Cares Fund. What is this PM Cares Fund? Now, from the time this corona has started, this new fund has come up. Earlier, there was only PM Relief Fund. Now you have this PM Cares Fund also. Within what time you have to transfer this unspent amount? Within 6 months of your FY. So by September, whatever unspent amount was there of the previous year, that you have to transfer it to these funds, either of these funds, PM Relief Fund or your PM Cares Fund. Okay, that was this point. Okay, that was simple enough. Now come to this point. If the unspent amount relates to an ongoing project, the example what I gave, okay, in such a case, what you have to do is you have to transfer it to unspent CSR account within 30 days. Now remember your chapter on dividends. There in a scheduled bank, in case you were you had unclaimed or unpaid dividends, you had a separate bank account called unpaid dividend account. The money of the company should have been kept in that particular account only. Like same concept they are using here also. You have to create one unspent CSR amount in a scheduled bank and transfer this unspent amount into that particular account. So for example, 31(3), okay, there you have some unspent amount. So within 30 days, that is by 30th April, you have to transfer it to this particular bank account, unspent CSR account. Okay, and you have to keep it there. Is that money lost forever? They say transfer to unspent CSR account within 30 days and spend it within 3 FYs. So from here, let's say this is 2020. Okay, from here 3 years ka time limit is given, 21, 22 and 2023. Within this 2023, whatever this balance amount is there in your unspent CSR account, that has to be fully spent. And in 23 ka board's report, you have to actually give a proper disclosure what all you did with this unspent CSR account. Okay, this point you understood? If you are not able to spend the required amount within 31st March, in the next 30 days, transfer it to a unspent CSR account in a scheduled bank. Then you have 3 years time to spend this amount. Now suppose if this spending is not possible, even in 2023 also you are unable to spend this amount, then what you should do? then this balance is there no in unspent CSR account, that will be transferred to PM Relief Fund or PM Cares Fund. So ultimate destination for this unspent CSR is PM Cares only. Only the timeline is changing. If it's for a short-term project, not ongoing project, in that case, immediately it will get transferred to PM Relief or PM Cares within 6 months. But if the unspent amount relates to a ongoing project, then you have a bigger timeline. 30 days you wait, put it in a scheduled bank, then 3 years time is given. Even in that 3 years you are not able to spend this amount, then ultimately it goes to your PM Relief or PM Cares Fund. Okay, so this was the main part what I wanted to talk to you in your CSR. So just write it down. Then the main reason why companies were so lenient about CSR was because they did not have a penalty clause. Now penalty, hefty penalty has been introduced. Disclosing unspent amount in board's report is another issue. Okay, they have also given you penalty. Company has a fine from 50k to 25 lakhs and every officer in default, imprisonment or fine till 5 lakh or both. So they've included your penalty provisions also in section 135. If possible, please learn this, okay? This you please learn, penalty provisions. Now, for what purposes can we use this amount in CSR? There's a specific schedule given for that. We all know schedule 7, that they've given a lengthy list. Okay, it's a very let's say it's a very broad list under which you can choose a lot of projects into which your money will go, into which your company's money will go. Now what is the amendment here? Okay, just 6 months before, like it was applicable for your May 20, they had included certain points. They said you can use your CSR money towards disaster management, including relief, rehabilitation and reconstruction activities. Now these words are simple enough, we can understand these words by themselves. They had included one more point, contribution to incubators funded by CGSG or any PSU, and they'd given a lengthy list of different organizations. Now what is this incubator? I told you in class. For example, there is an aeronautical engineering department in any IIT or any engineering college for that matter. Now there are students who are pursuing their bachelor's, master's or doctorate degrees over there. Now from where will they get the funds to do some big projects? Now whenever you're talking about specialized fields like aeronautical engineering, biotechnology, nanotechnology, the amount of funding required is also very high for the process to take place, for the trials to take place, etc. Who will give these funds? Such funds can be obtained by these companies. Okay, and if companies fund such projects, obviously 100% success, so you will not get 90% success. 90% will be unsuccessful, all these trials, projects and all. Only it has a very low success rate. But who will do this funding for such trials and research to take place? By these companies. So any amount what you spend towards such projects will be called as will be considered as CSR. So all these research wings, whatever are there in your IITs, DRDO, Indian Institute of Science, etc., they are called as technology incubators. There's a very specific term, technology incubators. Now these 2 points were already covered in your previous attempt ka amendment, but the point is previous attempt only did not take place. Now what is the new amendment in schedule 7? They said contribution to PM National Relief Fund or PM Cares Fund. Now PM Cares is a nice abbreviation, okay, but Cares does not mean a word by itself. It has a long form. What is it? PM, Citizen Assistant and Relief in Emergency Situations Fund. CARES. The word CARES means Citizen Assistant and Relief in Emergency Situation Fund. So it is not PM Care, okay? It is PM Cares Fund. Lot of fake accounts had come up when this fund was introduced initially. So whatever amount is given by a corporate entity to either PM National Relief or to PM Cares Fund will be considered as CSR activity. Now there are huge amount of money coming into PM Cares Fund for this purpose of for a fight against this COVID-19 pandemic going on. So all these amount, whatever is spent by these corporates during this time, will be considered as CSR activity. Now, a point to be noted here is, like your PM cares, there is something called as CM cares also at a state level. Now, the point of debate here is CM cares, whatever amount a company has given, will not come under your CSR projects, or you cannot use that amount in your IT Act computation. Now, once some people say that since it is towards eradication of a particular disease or illness, COVID-19 in that case, and the Schedule 7 interpretation should be a little more liberal. So even that fund should be considered as amount spent towards CSR. But if you actually see, technically, if you see the words, what do they say? Contribution to PM National Relief Fund or PM Care Fund or any other fund set up by the CG. They don't use the word SG. It has been removed. They only say any other fund set up by the CG. So on one side, you can say, yes, it is towards eradication of a particular illness. It should be considered as CSR. In another case, if you interpreted way too technically, then in that case, explicitly only PM Cares Fund is mentioned and not CM Cares Fund. Okay. So on this point, regarding this PM Cares, you might get questions this time. So be prepared. So this is the entire list of Schedule 7, what has been given here. The amendments, what I wanted you to make a note of was this point number 8, 9 and 11. 8 and 12 were for your previous attempt, and this point PM Cares Fund is your latest amendment. Okay. So just make a note or underline those points which we have ticked, or I have done some marking there. So these were your amendments relating to corporate law. Now this part B also, other laws. 2 minutes may you can finish it off. Okay. Indian Contract Act and your General Clauses Act. Iske upar you will not get any question. They cannot ask any question regarding this amendment. What is this amendment? Now section number 1 of every act, we used to say this section applies to the whole of India. In certain acts, we used to say excluding the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Now what happened in 2019? A J&K reorganization bill was brought in, proposing to make the state of J&K into 2 union territories. You know the story, you must have seen it. One union territory of J&K, Jammu and Kashmir, and the other union territory of Ladakh. Okay, so it was passed in the Parliament on 9th August and with effect from 31st October. With effect from 31st October, you have 2 new union territories in our union territory list, J&K and Ladakh. So now when the state of J&K is not there, you have to amend section 1 also of many acts. In our syllabus, we are amending only Contract and General Clauses Act. So now how will we read the Contract Act, section number 1? This act may be called as Indian Contract Act. It extends to the whole of India. There shall be no exclusion henceforth. It extends to the whole of India and shall come into force on the 1st September 1872. That is the small amendment. Then General Clauses Act. Now this was the only act where there was no territorial extent given. It neither said it extends to the whole of India, nor did it say it excludes the state of J&K. There was no territorial extent given in section number 1. What was given in section number 1 here? Short title. This act may be called as General Clauses Act 1897. Then they gave the commencement date. They never spoke about the extent, territorial extent. From now on, how will we read the first line? As per the J&K Reorganization Act, the General Clauses Act 1897 has been extended as a whole. So again, they are not telling it as whole of India. They are only saying it has been extended as a whole. Okay. So these are the 2 small amendments in your other laws. Not at all significant. So pay more attention to your corporate law amendments, right? So again, I'm requesting you either read it as such or better take a printout and read it along with your textbook. It will be easier for you. right? So these are all the amendments required for your November 20 examination, and there'll be a lot more people writing the exam now, right? The people who are writing again, the people who are supposed to write in May 20, and the fresh set of people who will be writing in November 20. So your preparation level should be that much better because you're competing with a lot many number of people this time. Okay, so read these amendments, stay healthy, stay safe, and study well. Okay, thank you all.